This is F.D. Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening.
Hello, this is Frank with F.D. Recovery, and this is the Weekly Intention. Yeah, I'm turning on my radio voice for all you listeners out there. So basically, the way the Weekly Intention goes is we go topic to topic, spiritual. Did I do that last time too? Spiritual principle to spiritual principle. We're going to leave that one in. That one's done right there. That will be in there forever in the sands of time. So the way it works is we pick a topic and spiritual principle, whatever we feel like, and we work on it throughout the week. And we come back, do a recap, and then we start with our next one for the next week. So last week was leadership, and this week will be trauma. I know that's a very popular subject out there with trauma, but before we dive into trauma, we will recap on leadership. Do you want to take the lead on this?
Absolutely. My name is Shelly, by the way, with F.D. Recovery and the Weekly Intention. Leadership. So I really didn't know what the difference between a leader was and what I thought I was doing leading. Turns out what I used to do was not called leadership, it was called being bossy. Which the people in my life today will confirm that I no longer, for the most part, have those bossy tendencies, but in fact have replaced them with leadership tendencies. So according to Google, leadership inspires and guides a team toward a common goal, while bossiness is about control. Shh. And giving orders without regard for others' feelings or input. Think about that.
Say that again.
Which part?
Just the last part.
Bossiness is about control and giving orders without regard for others' feelings or input.
Yep, that sounds about
completely
right.
in self-will.
Yeah. Well, I'm used to that kind of leadership, right? I'm used to that type of leadership when I was out in the dope game or in my addiction. Don't get me wrong, we still have our character defects to work through, so those things do pop up from time to time when, especially you're out in the workforce or your home life. And the thing that resonated with me during this whole leadership is I realized people don't really look at themselves like leaders, even in the simplest tasks. Which I dropped a video on Facebook and I explained it a little bit, and I said I realize one of my tasks as a leader is realize when I'm leading. And that's the most important time, because you're going to do it with your children, family, significant others. You're going to do it with your work. You're going to do it in a whole bunch of different ways. And if you're not aware that you're being in a leadership role, or maybe not just say you're in charge, that's not the correct definition, right? Leaders does not mean you're in charge. I've been in plenty of situations where, the leader always rose to the occasion, and they didn't necessarily have to be the boss, right? Or the shift leader for that matter. The leadership is somebody that, like you said, it encourages others and easy to follow, right? They know that it takes trust, right? Somebody's always going to willingly get behind the leader and follow them through the thick of it, because there's a level of trust there. They know that they're going to come out on the other end, and they're going to survive the scenario. So I think the most important thing for the whole leadership is realizing, because I think people, what I realized communicating with people is people don't really see themselves as leaders because they think it's an egotistical thing to do. Which, granted, yeah, you want to step into any scenario with humility, but also to fail when you're seeing being a leader and people are looking up to you naturally can also be a huge downfall to not recognize that and put forward the opportunity to put yourself in a good position to follow to lead them to a win,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was the most important thing that I realized this whole time. It's like, oh, a lot of people think that's connected to ego. Like that's a bad habit we got to break, because in order to be all these things that we wish to be, we have to not approach it with guilt and or some sort of shame, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
realized in my journey of becoming a leader is I realized my worth, right? When I'm in a situation and I know I'm worthy to lead, I know people will follow me because I know I have the skills to put forward, the abilities to complete the job, whatever that might be. And don't get me wrong, we're not 100%, but that's what a leader does. He rubs elbows and he's willing to learn and ask for help and do all these things. And I realized that a lot of my years and then listening to some of the people talk in the meetings, they were connecting leadership in a very egotistical way. Like what you said, boss,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the same thing, right?
Mm-mm.
And, wrapping that back into a more positive spin, I believe that there's a bad rap with leadership. I believe that people don't like to be led, right? Even though we got a bunch of followers out there, as far as in my life, I was always following the trend. I was always
Mm-hmm.
following the dope. Wherever the dope went, I went, right? I was always looking for a father figure in many ways, right? So I was always follow the leader, right? And at the same time, I had this egocentric mindset that I'm the boss, I'm this. Really, when you can't lead and you don't know how to follow, that means you're lost,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you end up being at this point where you're just lost, and you gotta get into this mode where you're willing to learn from a mentor and gain the strength and the seasons that you can get taught, right? Because it takes seasons to learn, right? It
Mm-hmm.
takes people in your life to teach you some of the skills to become a leader. And on top of it, that's how those things are developed, right? And getting back to the whole part of understanding um, that you're in a leadership role, whether you realize it or not. It might not be in a big way of a Fortune 500 company, but that's not the point. You're a leader amongst your peers. You're a leader amongst, and it doesn't mean that the other person's not a leader too. And that's the big thing is we all are teachers and students. And when you break it down on a level of sharing information and recovery, it's really important to understand no matter what you're approaching to, you are leading and you are an example to somebody. So, anything else you want to throw on leadership there?
You made a good point. Um, what I hear about everybody being a leader is, in my experience, what I've observed of others is there's a level of authenticity there. There are certain people in this world that have these natural abilities, and it doesn't take a lot of work or self work to really act on them. Charisma, and all these other different things that I can't quite name, but there are people out there that fall into these leadership roles. That's just because how they carry themselves. However they got there, it comes more naturally to others. I mean, just, parenting or art, painting, certain things. You may have two beginners who have never done it before, but one of those beginners may be just a little bit better at it.
Yeah.
And it takes work. And I think when somebody recognizes that they are in a leadership role, one of the key differences is to be able to recognize in others that they have the potential and figure out how you can help them get there and what kind of work they may need to achieve a level that you're on. There's so many different variables to it, but yeah, at the end, I think that it just comes naturally for others.
Yeah, you're right. There's, I don't mean to jump on here and go, hey, everybody be on top of the food chain. No, that's not, because that's the ego.
Hmm.
That's the egocentric way of looking at a leader. A leader is like somebody who's compassionate and can encourage and inspire. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I think a lot of us get caught. I know I did. I'll speak in I statements, but I know that the things that I used to get caught up on what a leader was like authoritarian, right? Or because my dad, the way he was, he ruled with an iron fist. So I had bad mentors and bad leadership role models. And when it came down to it, right, a good leader is like this, right? I watched the video today, and he's like, one day my boys are going to be stronger than me, and when that day comes, I'm not going to allow them to win me, but when they win me and they get to that point, I will acknowledge them and congratulate them. I won't try to belittle them and say, well, you're there because I taught you everything you know. Oh, I had a bad day. It's not going to be any of that. Those are the role models I had, right? Even if there wasn't just like, I'm going to build you up just so I know that one day when you're as strong as I am, I know you're ready to protect yourself in this world when you leave the coop, right? When you fly the coop. And I think that the most important thing that I got from that is I realized how much I had to be my own role model in so many different ways, and had to seek out that mentorship in other men. And for many years I did it in the wrong way. I did it with all the homeboys and all the hardcore dope fiends and people in prison, and I really gravitated towards that because I didn't really get taught anything of any kind of life skills, and that was the easiest route that I had to go, right, to learn all those machismo. Oh, I'm a tough guy. And my dad kind of lived that life too. He was able to get himself out of that, but he didn't really pass any of those lessons on. And who knows if I would even have received those lessons anyways. It's always if we're ands, who knows? Like,
You're not your dad. You don't know ultimately his experiences. You didn't walk in his shoes.
yeah,
And so it's really hard to pick apart someone in that sort of way because it doesn't get anybody anywhere.
yeah.
I think recognizing maybe the trauma that all of that entailed
Trauma.
and identifying, those pieces and what had a major impact on you, good or otherwise.
Yeah. Well, since we did a perfect little segue in there, I would hate to ruin opportunity to bring up our topic. We are done with leadership. Just remember, fulfill your leadership role wherever that might be. It doesn't have to be super glorious on the top of the food chain, battle ready. No, it's as simple as showing up in your daily life, being present, and being aware of your influence on others is the most important thing, because no matter what, you have somebody's time and attention. And if they're people in your family or in your recovery group, you have to honor that. And that's what a good leader does. He inspires and he encourages and he tries to.
Or she.
Or she, yeah. Well, I'm a guy, and that's the only experience I know. So sorry if I say he lie. I'm just. But yes, yeah. He or her.
Have you ever heard the golden rule?
Yeah.
Treat others how you want to be treated, and I think that is golden for a reason.
Well, I don't think you maybe
Sound like
because you don't want to be treated how I treat one of my best friends. We treat each other horribly.
I retract the statement. For those of you listening, hopefully you can put that in context of what I maybe intended it to be.
Well, all right, let's move on to trauma.
Which I may have just now experienced.
Yeah, that was a little bit of trauma for me too. For me too. Did you want to look it up, or?
Oh yeah, hold on.
We got our reader back in the house.
I will not be in next week. I have a dentist appointment.
That disappointment, you heard it now.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to hop on and be co-host,
yeah, let me know. Hit
Frank
me up.
will interview you.
Yeah.
Okay, trauma definition. Another vague one. Trauma refers to a deeply distressing or overwhelming experience that can have significant and lasting negative effects on a person's mental, emotional, and physical well being. It can be caused by a single event or a series of events that threaten or cause physical injury or death, such as accidents, natural disasters, violence, abuse, overwhelm a person's coping mechanisms, leading to feelings of fear, helplessness, terror, disrupt a person's sense of safety and security, leaving them feeling vulnerable and exposed. And I'm going to read a little bit more. It says trauma can manifest in various ways, including psychological, physical, and behavioral. And psychological anxiety, depression, nightmares, disassociation, flashbacks, physical trauma, pain, headaches, gastrointestinal issues, sleep disturbances, behavioral changes, avoidance, difficulty in relationships, and substance abuse. All the negatives.
Yeah, that's sounds about right. That's trauma in a nice, neat package, right?
Hmm.
So, I have plenty of experience with trauma. Growing up, there was violence, things like that, neighborhood. You talk to my parents, they'll be like, "Oh, it wasn't too bad." Yeah, you weren't getting your ass beat, right? That's all water under the bridge, and we've talked about it, but doesn't mean that I can't speak about it, right?
Mhm.
That's what calls that's what we call making peace with the trauma, right? It doesn't necessarily excuse their action and or the event, right? The way I see it, for me, the way trauma works is the event happens. There's an event, right? The trauma is my attachment to the event,
Hmm.
therefore, psychologically and all spiritually and physically, because it manifests in those three for me and also for a lot of people, right? It could be some things as flashbacks, trigger words, and then take you back there as if you were in the moment, to
Mhm.
the point where you are sweating as if it's actually happening, physical stuff actually happening, right? um Obviously, I don't say that to belittle the event at all, but it is my physical attachment to the event in the past, right? That's the way I've always seen trauma. Once I started working on it, I go, okay. The reason I mention it like that, because a lot of times, especially with my past, I identified with my trauma. It was a part of me. It was almost an appendage, right?
Hmm.
And I thought that I can't, I had this extra foot or this extra arm that I had to lug around with me everywhere I went. And I had to make sure there was an extra, seat for my foot hanging off my side, because I needed that. Everywhere I went, I had to make sure I made space for this, because it was a part of me. And that's what I really, because if you have an extra foot, you're going to know.
I sure
So,
hope so.
and you live your life based off of those accommodations,
Mhm.
right? So that's obviously a far-fetched representation, but it's for me, it's that in the literal sense, is I have to make space for this. I
Mhm.
have to carry it around for me or with me, and people are going to see it. It may not be right from the gate, but they do some inspection. They're going to notice that extra foot eventually, right? So long story short, is I have this thing that I identify with, and the reason why I had to shift my perspective and say, "Hey, this was an event that happened." And I realize I'm attached to it. It's not attached to me. It's already gone.
Mhm.
It's already in the sands of time. But here for me, I am reliving it and I am holding on to it. Not to say that it didn't happen, or that excuses anybody for any action, because there are situations where we are victims.
Mhm.
There's a point in our life when we're at a certain age or a certain situation where you are 100% the victim. But there's that but. There is things called victimhood. and where you identify with it in such a way where it allows you or allows you to stop your growth and inhibits your spiritual well-being and your physical and mental progression, right? So getting down to this whole letting go and redefining, I would say, redefining it and saying, hey, these are just events that have happened. And for me, it really helps, right? It sounds very slick, but when you're in the thick of it and you're dealing with certain abuses that you've went through, it's a little different, right? So, but the reason why I say it's attachment piece is because pain is, the Buddha said pain is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. That means optional means choice. So that means there's a choice in the matter. And once choice enters the picture with something that you thought was a part of you and your identity that you could not change, then once choice enters the picture, that means you have agency over the issue. That means which once wasn't a choice and that you were burdened with and you could not escape now becomes a choice. All right. And so what that does is that enters the state of agency, is where you have a way out instead of being bound by some of these thought process and these identifications that you've lived with for so long, meaning the event that replays physically, mentally, spiritually. Once choice enters the picture, you start realizing there might be a way out of this. And you might have a chance to redefine your identity in the events that happen to you. That means you are no longer bound by its chains and you have a way out. You're no longer the victim, you are the survivor. There's a difference, right? And that's what, for me, I'm going to get a t-shirt that says survivor.
Try not to laugh.
I'm a survivor.
Oh, dear Lord.
So you want to throw anything on top of that whole trauma?
I don't know. Hard to follow. When I think of trauma, my reactions to it, when I first started drinking, my reason behind drinking was in my, I think, late teens, early 20s. I wasn't the kind of addict that started when I was a preteen or what have you. It came later. Due to a dysfunctional family lifestyle, as I know many people can relate to, I tried to stay the good girl route for a really long time. I really involved myself with my reading, education, whatever that looked like in the moment. And then right after I graduated high school, there was this really gray area where underage drinking, where I was at and who I was with, it wasn't necessarily like margaritas, right? On Saturdays, like the family's having margaritas, couple teenagers here, no big deal, you're in a safe place sort of thing. So I found myself leaning on that quite regularly because I really liked how it made me feel. And then over the years, it became legal. And then I now had an excuse. I could go by my own. I was 21. Then I started drinking and also smoking weed pretty excessively. But my excuse at the time was, well, I didn't party in high school. I was a good girl. I didn't party and, I didn't make all those bad decisions that other people made. And I used that as my trajectory to make bad decisions at that moment, not realizing that I had an addictive personality. In hindsight, uh, I've had an addictive personality now, probably since I came out of the womb. But I didn't recognize that till much later. And over my time of drinking and smoking and then also getting into other things, some other things started to happen. And then I would start drinking and using and start covering up those feelings because I liked the feeling that alcohol and drugs gave me so much. I didn't want to let it go.
Mm.
And of course, as other people out there may also relate with, when you start making decisions under the influence all the time, those decisions really are impulsive and there's not really good intentions behind it, or at least on a bigger scale. one thing led to another, and my life came crashing to pieces. And it wasn't until I got sober and started this journey that I realized how much of how much of that dysfunction that I grew up with and kind of experiencing here and there, how much that really affected me. And doing the groundwork and figuring out those triggers and the trauma and everything that really wasn't good that I chose to ignore. Like, man, I've been through some shit. And I'm not saying my shit's better than yours or, it was less significant or more significant, but it was shit that I never wanted to feel. And even to this day, it's hard. It's hard working through that. And I actually recently, we've had a rough week, you and I. We've kind of been at ends and we're recovering from being sick and we're finally feeling better, but things are at its rest. What I came to realize is that there were certain situations where I realized I felt triggered, and it was because of how things in our early beginnings, how they went. They didn't go well. And there are certain situations that are really minor in the grand scheme of things, but I realized I had all these feelings anytime it came up. And it triggered this anxiety and this emotion. And I kept making all of those like mistakes that I made in the beginning. And I'm like, I don't want to be like that. And I finally clicked that I was triggered and what that trigger looked like. And I was able for the first time to be able to divert it in a way I've never been able to. And I can tell you I've had a much better week because I've separated that trauma and that trigger, and I was able to make a more sound decision that wasn't based off of impulse feelings and anxiety. It was removing myself and identifying these traumas and making better decisions from it. Trauma
Makes sense.
sucks.
Makes sense. Yeah. Well, see, another thing that it says right here is psychological trauma is a severe emotional response to a stressful event that overwhelms a person's ability to process it emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
It can be caused by direct or indirect experiences such as accidents, natural disasters, war zones, bodily injuries, or sexual violence. While it's normal to experience fear, anxiety after a traumatic event, a response is unique. Some people recover naturally over time. Others may experience long-term symptoms, right? And that was the thing is for me, it was always long-term
Mm-hmm.
symptoms because I've always used drugs and alcohol to prolong not prolong, not even start the
Mm-hmm.
whole healing process.
You just kind of cover it up.
Yeah, you don't eat, but you also don't eat. For me, for many years, I was in such an unhealthy environment that I didn't even know that there was healing or there was a path for anything like recovery. Or I was always told what I needed to do by a judge. You need to go to an anger management class. You have to go to these meetings. And I never did them. Right? They were so foreign to me that it just wasn't part of my universe at that time. There was no self-help book that I was reading. There
You're
was
like, no, I got this.
it was most of my life illiterate, going with my next best guess in the trenches of drugs, in jail, in lockdown facilities, prison, mental institutions, different things like that. And that was my song and dance for a very long time. And through that, I became institutionalized, never really read, until one of my last times is I started getting a little bit open to that, right? I started having spiritual experiences and I started trying to learn new things. And it took a while to get to this path of recovery, that I'm on now. But, my road to recovery didn't start, and it didn't start with recovery. It started with spirituality first. I tried meditation and all these things. And then I started waking up to the reality of all my traumas, right? I started going, oh, I didn't Like, because the thing people think, well, we're gonna get into recovery and everything's gonna be great. No, you just started digging, and when you hit that water line, because that's what it's gonna be like. I don't know if you've ever done plumbing or any type of anything. You hit a water line, you get everything shuts off. You're out of water for 2 days. All that stuff. You got to get a plumber out, the whole nine.
It's
Right?
traumatizing. Sorry.
It's it's traumatizing, but the whole thing is when you start digging and you don't know how or what you're doing and you don't have any guidance, you don't call PG&E right before you dig, you hit a gas line. So there's a way to do it, and it's never perfect. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna hit that water line, and you're gonna have to call a plumber. You're gonna have to get someone down that knows what they're doing. But that's the way this all works: is you get around people that have done it before you, that know the way, can walk you through steps, walk you through this whole therapy thing. For me, I just had no clue that people could ever be kind, could ever be gentle. Right. The people that I've always gotten thrown with in life were always as crude as me and just as abusive.
Yeah.
Right.
And you don't have to be that way.
No. But that doesn't, you get the reason why people run in the beginning, because they start facing all those that icky. They face the suck, right? And it makes them run. It makes them want to cover up, use again.
Sure
But
does.
I urge you, if you're out there and you're in the beginning process, it's gonna suck for a little bit, but get people around you that have done it before you, and you might have a fighting chance. Get around people that actually give a fuck about you, because you're not going to find it out there in the fucking real world. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good people, but if you're suffering from drugs or alcohol, you need to get around addicts and alcoholics. I cannot tell you, they went years and years not knowing what the solution was until AA came around and it started saving people's asses. I've watched people try church. I watched people try to do California sober. I've watched people try to do everything and they're fucking miserable and they end up back in jail or in the crazy bin. The only way I've seen work is thoroughly taking the steps through NA or AA and watch people's what would have, could have, should have come into a reality, and they started living a life and started gaining things beyond their wildest dreams, but only until they put down the fight and started getting with the winning side and started digging with the right people in the right situations, right? Because before we used to try to go to the trap house, I'll get my support there. These are the only people I know. I'm gonna show them how good I'm doing, and then by the end of it, you're smoking dope and drinking again, right? And so if you're out there and you're dealing with trauma, just understand that it's gonna control you at first, but if you can get around the right people, they can help you disarm it and help you get away from the identification with it, where it doesn't control your life. You have to deal with your demons or they will deal with you. I promise you. That's one thing that holds true my whole life, until I was able to face these things in my life. Then, and only then, until I faced it, was I able to gain agency over my life, and I put choice back into the picture.
I want to mention too, because you talk about mistakes and surrounding yourself for the right people, and one thing I want to also mention is to not be afraid to fall and then get back up again. That was my experience when I first started this whole thing. I thought I had it under control, and then I started making bad decisions, and I was afraid to go back to the rooms, afraid to go see those people again out of, fear, judge me and this, that, and the other thing. And I was doing so good, and I had this amount of clean time. And I, stoned and drunk as fuck, and here I am at the bottom again. Because it's not a good feeling, and you know what that good can be. So don't be afraid if you fall, even after years of clean time, to get back up again, and don't let that stigma hold you down, because chances are if you go back to those rooms, there's somebody else who has had that same experience, and they can help you get through it.
Yeah, look around the room and ask some questions. You'll realize you're not as unique as you like to think. right? Unique as you like to think. That's
Can you put
not
that on
going to
a sweater
happen.
too?
Unique as you like to think. It rhymes. We'll slap it together. It's a trademark by F.D. Recovery. So this will be our work on this week is unwinding some of this trauma, getting around the correct people in a constructive place to unpack all this stuff. Don't just go off any Joe Schmo on the street and start trauma dumping. Like, oh, we're trauma bonding right now. It's gonna happen, right? You know, or even
Word
getting
vomit.
around the like me and my sister. We trauma bond most of our life is because we went through certain
You
scenarios
guys
together.
are doing that on a couch over the summer.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like right, you got to be careful with who you're really doing this with, and you know, you're not going to be perfect. It's going to get messy, but the thing is you got to put one foot in front of the other and get around some positive people, influential people, get around leaders, right? Get around leaders that have done this before you and know the path, right? And so this week we're working on trauma, unpack it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get after it this week, guys.
Deal with that PTSD
PTSD.
in a healthy way.
Yeah. Not with drugs, guys. Stay off drugs. Stay off drugs. This is F.D. Recovery, and we out.
Bye.
Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to F.D. Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor. Get connected to local support groups. And for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.